On a recent episode of Bussin' with the Boys, the guys had on New England Patriots head coach Mike Vrabel. When asked about how his family was doing, Coach Vrabel shared something that caught our attention.
Tyler's actually at BC helping out O-line, so he's grinding, figuring out that.
The coaching grind?
Yeah, and so it's on Vizio, and he's like, Dad, the first time I said, hey, can
all
I
the
help? And the
formations
guy's like,
get plugged in.
draw these cards on Vizio. He goes, I was there for 4 hours. I think I got 3 cards done. He's like, there's got to be a better way for this.
Tyler Vrabel, a young coach just starting his career, had asked the same question we've heard from hundreds of others over the past decade. Why are coaches still using Vizio? To answer that question, we need to understand how coaches got here in the first place. But first, you have to understand something about football itself. Football has always been driven by innovation. The forward pass was legalized in 1906 and completely transformed the game. The West Coast offense revolutionized how teams thought about timing and precision. The air raid opened up new possibilities for spreading defenses thin, and more recently, RPO concepts have changed how offenses attack modern defenses. Each of these innovations took time to catch on. The forward pass was legal for decades before coaches really embraced it. The air raid was dismissed as gimmicky, and now you can't watch a football game without seeing a version of its concepts. Innovation happens on the field, but adoption happens slowly. The same pattern plays out with how coaches worked. For most of football's history, coaches drew plays by hand. Literal hand-drawn diagrams, copied on mimeograph machines, distributed as paper playbooks. This worked fine when offenses had 20 plays and everyone ran basically the same stuff. Then, as the game became more complex, coaches needed better tools, but players were changing too. The athletes walking into meeting rooms in the 1990s had grown up with Nintendo and early computers. They were starting to think differently about how they consumed information. Meanwhile, coaches were still handing out thick binders and expecting players to study from paper. Computer technology promised to solve both problems. Programs like Playmaker emerged in the early 90s, football-specific software that let coaches draw digitally for the first time. It was revolutionary. But as computers became standard in every office, coaches discovered Microsoft Office. PowerPoint had better fonts, more formatting options, and added the ability to present. And then came Visio. Microsoft's diagramming software that created perfectly crisp, architectural quality drawings. It wasn't built for football, but it made beautiful playbooks.
I was very fortunate when I started coaching.
This is Bob Surace. He's been coaching for over 3 decades and is currently the head coach at Princeton. But he's also someone who's lived through every generation of coaching technology, from hand-drawn playbooks to the digital tools we use today.
My first job where I wasn't a GA was at Maine Maritime Academy. The head coach was a guy named John Heward, a brilliant guy, very Belichickian in that constantly looking for edges. We used a program called Playmaker. Playmaker 1.0 back in 1991. That was the outset of it. But it was different than my dad's playbooks, which were hand-drawn and copied.
Think about that progression. Hand-drawn playbooks copied on machines, then digital tools that seemed revolutionary.
I used Playmaker, all the different Playmaker 2.0, 3.0, all the different variations. Even when I was in the NFL, we used it. And then Coach Lewis wanted to adapt and go to Visio.
Each step forward solved real problems. Playmaker Pro was faster than hand drawing, Vizio was more precise than Playmaker, but as much as Vizio did for coaches at the time, it presented a whole new set of challenges.
Football coaches aren't architects, right?
Vizio was designed for architects, engineers, business analysts, people creating floor plans and network diagrams. And yet, this architectural drawing tool became the standard for an entire profession. Why? Because it made beautiful diagrams. But beauty has a cost.
Something like Vizio, you could make the sharpest, most perfect angles, right? When they saw the picture, it was beautiful. There were some limits to what they could do outside of that, but only so many coaches could figure that out without having to take a course. You had to hire an architect, really. You had to hire somebody who had that skill. So the functionality and the timeliness of it. A game plan week, you're preparing for Lehigh. Well, Lehigh is going to have a different offense and defense and special teams than the next opponent we have, which is Howard. You got to, in a short period of time, Tuesday morning, we're meeting with our players. We watch the film Sunday and Monday, we put the plays in. Well, if you're not an architect and you can't draw this stuff up quick, you're not sleeping.
To understand why Vizio became so entrenched, you have to understand what coaches actually do when they build a playbook. It's orchestrating multiple moving pieces.
When you talk about doing that for offensive line, tight end, running backs, quarterback, and wide receivers, there's a lot of different pieces of work that have to happen, and they have to happen not in any specific, but in succession, right? They can't be going on at the same time.
This is John Reagan. He spent 3 decades coaching at every level, from Division I schools to the NFL, and is now vice president of football at Just Play. His perspective comes from years of actually living inside these workflows.
It's computer-based, right? It's locally based. And so, one of the things that we did even as early as 2019 and 2020 when I was at Maryland and we were using Vizio, if we were working on, say, a run play, we're working on power. And as the offensive line coach, I have to make sure that it's drawn up the right way in all these diagrams. So I would go through it with our GA, and he would have it on his computer. And when we were done with that, he would then go to the running back and make sure that the footwork was right for the running back and running back coach, not me. But he'd have to take either that computer or save it and go to that coach.
This is where the first cracks in the system appear. Modern football demands collaboration, but the tools force coaches to work in isolation.
Truly, anybody that's worked in that point in time knows you had to figure out who was the master keeper of the thumb drive or the hard drive that had the playbook on it. Because it wasn't like the running back coach could work on this thumb drive, the O-line coach could work on this thumb drive, and they would be the same. They wouldn't.
The master thumb drive keeper. When you hear coaches talk about this, you realize how problems might arise.
You still have to get everything to one location, and somebody's got to quality control it from that location. Anytime you make changes, big deal, right? You got to make sure you're making changes off the most recent edition of it.
We've worked with coaches who know these limitations intimately. They experience this frustration daily. So why don't they change?
I had an analyst tell me one time, you don't get fired using the thing that the coach has used for 20 years that got him here.
This is Austin Barone. He co-founded Just Play, but before that, he was a player at Kansas.
And it was really eye-opening because in that moment, it didn't really matter what the individual used. It just mattered that it was acceptable for that one person.
In a profession where careers can end with a single bad season, risk aversion makes perfect sense. The familiar tool represents safety, even when it's inefficient.
Change is really hard. I think culturally, sometimes people are afraid to bring something to their boss.
Add hierarchy to risk aversion, and you get institutional inertia. The young coach who sees the inefficiency can't suggest the head coach's preferred tool is outdated. So the cycle continues. When you understand how coaches actually work, the limitations become obvious. Modern football demands collaboration, but legacy tools force isolation.
The wide receiver coach goes, no, that receiver's supposed to have a push-crack rule. And if the wide receiver needs to have a push-crack rule, then that entire play has to be pulled out. The wide receiver coach has to make sure he finds the master copy of the playbook, that gets changed to push-crack, that it gets quality controlled, that it gets printed out, that the right one gets printed out, and then it gets put back into Catapult to present it.
We've watched this scenario play out countless times. The tools that once enabled progress now create bottlenecks.
What I've noticed is really, truly, because of that, the quality of playbooks has diminished in those sense because people spend less time in them and you don't end up with everything being right and the way you want it to work. There's no way to present that to players, right? You just either text it out or you PDF it and print it and send it out, or you PDF and print it and hand it to your players. There's no way to present it.
This is the biggest gap that coaches don't realize when it comes to their workflow. It's not about coaching workflow. It's about how information reaches players.
You walk into a locker room, you see 100 guys on their phone or their tablet, and when it's time to go to a meeting, big old binder comes out and you walk upstairs.
This was Austin Barone's observation when he was a player at Kansas, watching his own coaches struggle with outdated tools while he and his teammates lived on their devices. That disconnect became the spark for Just Play.
You see guys at tutoring or training table, or everybody's just on a device. And it just didn't really quite make sense that the medium in which athletes consume content on most was not being used to communicate the information that we needed to prepare to win games.
That realization became the foundation for Just Play.
We came at the problem through the lens of an athlete, not a coach. It took us a few years to really understand the efficiencies that we could create for the coaching staff, because we were so lasered in on how can we create a better experience for the athlete.
Coaches are constantly searching for better ways to engage and teach their players, but the gap between how coaches work and how players learn keeps growing.
They're more engaged. That's been, honestly, like that's the biggest thing, is they're more engaged with the playbook and with the scouting report. When we used to print it out and you see it in the locker and it'd just be in the locker. And they'd bring it out for your meetings and when they're supposed to, but to have instant access and, hey, what were they doing on third down, or what was going on, and what's that play the coach was talking about, and what do I have to do, and just legitimately be able to pull it out of your pocket and look at it. It is funny to see the guys talking in the locker room, with their phones out or with their iPad and actually going through the game plan and what it is while they're watching film with each other. It's a more engaging tool than what we've had in the past.
We'll be walking down the hallway and somebody will have it up on their phone. What are you looking at? Oh, I'm looking at the scout report, coach. Okay, tell me about it.
This shift in how players consume information isn't about replacing fundamentals. It's about meeting them where they already are.
What are the kids going to be doing? They're going to be scrolling through a bunch of misinformation that our society gives them. So why not scroll through and get great information about your program, get your playbook, your scouting reports.
Just Play allows you to teach every single kid in your room, and it can help you funnel the kids to it if you know they need that. If they're not a classroom kid, you give them everything they need on Just Play, and they're able to learn a lot faster and pick up the defense or offense much quicker.
Understanding these problems from a coaching perspective changed everything. When you've been part of this process, you start asking different questions. The real breakthrough came when we realized we didn't need to eliminate what coaches do. We needed to eliminate what slows them down.
What we want to be able to do is make that process significantly easier and integrate that more into their workflow, as opposed to being really fragmented solutions, but also make it optimized for how they work.
Time is a coach's most valuable resource. Yet we've seen coaches spending entire winters wrestling with software instead of getting back to what they're meant to do, coaching.
Time is really important. It's really valuable. So it's not stealing from our time. For the players, maybe it's an extra ability to watch more video, have an extra one-off meeting with a player who's struggling with something at home.
The scout cards is the thing that saves them hours upon hours, because once they're drawn, they can pull from the library that they have. And, my guys have said, legitimately, 6 to 9 hours probably gets saved from when guys used to actually draw cards. So that's been something that, they're not there right to the last second. And then going out to the practice field, they can actually help with some other things.
The drawing tool is much more user-friendly than Visio, PowerPoint. You don't have to save every line that you could possibly ever want and be dragging it in. The ability to use like the multi-point tool, once you get used to that, is super quick. I can draw a whole route combination super fast, not even going from a template, just like clicking and dragging.
But the biggest thing for me was I'm able to leave the office and not stay up here all day and just watch the tape. I'm able to go home, pull out my iPad, and I still have everything in front of me. So I can go through all the drawings, I can watch the video on my iPad, just to study myself. That way I'm able to teach it the best way I can to my players the next day.
It allows you to have more time to do the other stuff, whether that be watching film, analyzing the data, whatever it is. The ability to, again, quickly draw the plays, get them pushed out to the players, frees you up. You just have more time.
When you solve the fundamental workflow problems, everything else becomes possible. We've seen this transformation happen over and over.
Mondays, we'd get in as an offensive staff, get together in the afternoons, later in the evening. We would obviously put our script together, put together our game plan. And then as we were going through the meeting, the GAs in the back would sit down and type up and draw up all the plays. So that night by 8:30, 9 o'clock, we're able to push that to our players because we got practice first thing Tuesday morning. The best thing about that is our players are able to sit there Monday night, wait on the script, go through the 25 plays we're going to rep for Tuesday morning, get an idea of what we're going to do, and then we have a chance to double down Tuesday morning in our meetings, watch the tape, go over the drawings again. That way they're best prepared for practice Tuesday.
Gone are the days of drawing it on Visio. You show it to a coach, he says it looks great. You put it onto PDF, you send it to the players. Well, then coach looks at it a second time and there's things he didn't catch the first time, so now you got to change it. Now you've got to reprint it to PDF. You've got to re-update the players. It's just instantaneous.
The thing that I like, if there needs to be a change, it's a real-time change. Mark could be on a different computer. I say, that split needs to be 6 yards wider. He can change it, and then it's 6 yards wider on the screen.
Real-time collaboration isn't just more efficient. It's fundamentally different.
And then I like the fact that through all the devices, you have notifications where there's new installs, changes in plays, whatever that may be. Kids are going to get their notifications. And, a lot of times a notification from an app is better than a text message with some of the kids these days.
When technology serves coaches instead of constraining them, the results speak for themselves. We've learned that in this profession, small advantages compound into championship differences.
Last year, 8 of our 10 games were decided by 7 points or less. That way you're looking for edges in every edge. And when we went to you guys with Just Play,
the goal was never to replace coaching expertise. It was to amplify it.
Our kids were definitely more prepared. There were situations in a ball game that they would come over and say, hey, coach, this was exactly what y'all put on the scouting report. For whatever reason, they're more apt to look at a phone and see all the small details instead of on a piece of paper and have to read it through. So there were details that we saw in a ball game that showed up in scouting report that made a huge difference.
Having the ability to check and see who's actually using it. That's the other thing. It's like paper can't tell you, what that is, and we're able to do that. And, say a kid's doing great, hey, this is why. Say a kid's not doing great, maybe this is why, and having those candid conversations with the guys.
Remember, Vizio wasn't a mistake. PowerPoint wasn't wrong. These tools represented the best available options at the time. Coaches adapted them because they had to, because nothing better existed.
Playmaker 4.0 was better than 2.5. Visio was better than Playmaker. When I got to Princeton, we used PowerPoint. When Coach Flynn, it was Brian Flynn when he came to us, showed me Just Play, and it kind of combined a lot of the good elements of Playmaker, and football coaches aren't architects, right? The ease of use compared to Visio. They combine the access, and you weren't hand drawing things.
Tools should evolve alongside the profession. When the game changes, when players change, and the demands on coaches' time intensify, the tools need to keep pace.
The relationship has always been a love-hate. We love to use it, we hate learning how to use it. My theory is that as the generation that's just always been used to learning new things in technology grows into coaching, there's probably a lot more acceptance for that.
That fear of change, it's real, but it doesn't have to be a barrier.
Utilizing Just Play is so easy for people, but the fear of change is so high that at times it can seem really daunting to try to learn something new.
Our coaches, some of whom are like me, and they're struggle to use new things, but the program is easy for even to utilize for the Neanderthals like me that, we were playing in the dinosaur age and utilizing handwritten 16 millimeter tape and all that stuff.
What ends up happening though is when they get their hands on Just Play, there's a little bit of receptiveness. Somebody else on staff grabs them and takes them under their wing, shows them how much time they save, and very quickly after that, it becomes a must-have for them. What we want to be able to do is make that process significantly easier and integrate that more into their workflow as opposed to being really fragmented solutions, but also make it optimized for how they work.
That is the evolution. It's not about replacing what coaches do. It's about taking all the work they're already doing and carrying it through to completion. Remember Tyler Vrabel's question?
There's got to be a better way for this.
We've spent over a decade working with coaches to find that better way. The answer wasn't replacing what coaches do. It was removing what holds them back from doing it well.
Well, to me, and being a coach is about change, because, the players that come through the door are different than the players that you had before. Technology is always getting better. So I would say just don't be afraid of change, to give it a chance.
Change is what coaching football is all about. Sometimes the biggest change is simply having the right tools to do what you already know how to do.